just off to meet Sam Odiwe, who's the bass player for All Saints as well as for Tom Walker. Sam's awesome, amazing bass player, really cool guy. This doesn't even smell anymore, so it's completely pointless. Anyway, it does kind of add to the shot, I feel. Please, as usual, follow me on Instagram and like and subscribe any YouTube content that I've got up. That'd be much appreciated. Thank you. Yeah, so of course these things don't always go to plan.
I never have Arsenal through and through till I die, mate. Hey Jack, how's it going? I'm Sam Odiwe and I play for Tom Walker and All Saints. The bass playing bit, actually, I was about 13 or 14 and I found my dad's bass in the loft, which is a wicked old Ibanez, like a 70s one, the one that Phil Lynott used to use with Thin Lizzy. It's all black, it's absolutely sick. So I found that and asked, my dad was like, oh, you found my old bass. And he played a bit and sort of showed me a couple of things, like 12-bar blues and stuff. So I didn't have an amp or anything, so I was just sort of playing. And then really sweet, like he obviously played it all week. And then he went and bought me an amp. I remember like a couple of weeks later, he bought like a tiny little practice amp. So that's how I got into it really. I tried to play a bit of guitar and it was just so fiddly. I was like, oh fuck this, I'll just go straight back to the bass. And then yeah, he just showed me like, my uncle was a bass player as well, who'd played a lot when he was younger. So yeah, I just got into like Chic, Jacko, Pastorius and like Stanley Clarke, like all that kind of stuff when I was younger. And then my old mates, we were listening to like the Chili Peppers and Jamiroquai and like all that kind of stuff. So that's how I got into the bass playing really. Sort of pop music wise and session stuff, I went to ACM after I finished my A-levels. Funnily enough, like actually, I didn't know what to do at uni. So I sort of went as a sort of gap year. I've been playing the bass since I was sort of 14, properly 15. And I just love playing it. So I went to do that for the year. And then about halfway through, this guy came in, this guitarist guy. I'd love to remember what his name was. And he was obviously a session dude and he'd done like Top of the Pops and he was talking about doing functions and stuff like that. And I was just like, wow, that sounds amazing. Like getting paid to play at people's weddings and like doing TV shows. I just thought the whole thing sounded wicked. And it was about that halfway through that I thought, I really would like to do this properly. Like I thought maybe I won't finish this course and go to uni, I'll do this. And then like loads of things in music, it's always been in the right place at the right time. And that particular year at ACM, they had some really good auditions for people. So this guy came in called Bryn Christopher, who was signed to Polydor at the time. And I did the audition for him. And I very luckily got that gig. And that was like pretty much what set it off really. There was another guy called Will Rendell who was signed to Sony, and that audition came through. So I basically like left ACM with these two gigs. Bryn in particular was really, he basically went off and we did like the first proper tour. We supported Amy Winehouse on a UK back-to-back tour, which she didn't finish because obviously there was all the stuff going on. But it was amazing. That was just how I started. And like, to be honest, it was funny because I took it, not necessarily took it for granted, but it just happened so luckily and so like naturally that I didn't really realise what a big deal it was. Do you know what I mean? So we were kind of doing this stuff and we worked with Bryn for probably 2 years. And he's wicked. He went on to become a songwriter and he's done loads of stuff. He did that tune called Sweet Lovin' with Sigala. He's the vocalist on that. I think he wrote that and he's written lots of songs for people since. Yeah, so I did that and that led into another band called Vagabond, supported Bryn on this tour. That was like a setup where the main guy, this guy Alex, was signed to a label and was doing stuff through Xenomania, which was like a kind of production house. And so then they needed a bass player. I went in to audition for that. And obviously I knew all the guys because I'd been on tour with them a little bit and we'd hung out. So then I ended up doing that. And it, you know what I mean? It just kind of snowballed. And then funnily enough, when that finished, that's kind of when I realised how lucky I'd been to get those gigs because I'd never done a function. I didn't have any bread and butter gigs. And luckily, obviously, I was still at home. I'd sort of finished college. I still lived with my mum and dad. And I'd never done a function or anything. So I suddenly, almost started from scratch, like sort of getting to know people who were doing function gigs and reaching out to people who I'd met in these other projects and sort of being like, what the hell what do you do? Like, how do you get these gigs? And because I sort of came about it almost the wrong way around, sort of didn't do functions and get to know people, I sort of started off very luckily landing these really good auditions that just happened to come into college. So yeah, it was mad. And then it's just I've just sort of kept going. I've always, whenever it's gone quiet, I've just kept plugging away, really. As I've done it longer and longer, the circle of people I know has got bigger and bigger, and then you seem to meet enough people that kind of keeps you floating through things, and yeah, more and more opportunities came round, and a lot of the stuff I've ever done's always been through word of mouth. I've done auditions, but the auditions have come through someone recommending me for something. In music, I've always been good at hearing something and playing it back. You know? Oh, this doesn't sound really arrogant, but I remember being in Year 7 music, for example, and we had to play the theme tune from Titanic, you know, the Celine Dion song. All you had to do was play the melody. But I remember that I didn't find it difficult for someone to like sing what it was and then just like, you know, play on the notes until you found the note that started it, and then I could hear, do you know what I mean, how to move, which I guess is obvious, but I remember a load of people in the lesson just not being able to like even find, you know, someone went, "Buh," be able to find that note on the keyboard. And I remember just thinking, that's like, I don't get why no one can do this. So I guess maybe that was, music was always something I was really, really enjoyed. I did it at GCSE and had a wicked music teacher that was just really encouraging. Even though I'd only just really been playing the bass for a couple of years when I started doing that. And I just loved it, man. Like, bass lines are just the best. There's nothing better. Like Chic and like Jamiroquai tunes and Funkadelic and Parliament, like the bass lines, they're just the best thing. I think that's what's appealed to me, and still now, a good bass line just gets to me like the way nothing else can. Even same with the synth bass. It's just when you hear some great bass playing, it just resonates with me in a way that like the other instruments just never did as much, I think. You get what you put into those colleges, I think. Sometimes those music colleges come in for a bad rep, do you know what I mean? But the experience I had was wicked. I really enjoyed it. I think the biggest thing was confidence, and sort of having played at school and played in a band with a couple of mates, and it was really good to go somewhere where there was other people playing, and also just be able to gauge how good or bad you were at different things. And that year was particularly good because there was only sort of 13 bass players on the entire year, I think. So there wasn't many people, so you got quite a lot of attention. You played in loads of bands, played with loads of different musicians. But yeah, music-wise, I think I learned obviously the basic things like ear training, but we didn't do a hell of a lot of sight reading or anything at that level because it was literally just a diploma course. But the best thing obviously was the auditions that I was lucky enough to do out of it. Bass tutor there I think it was through him, had recommended me for the auditions because they had like a whole, at the time, I don't know what the structure is now, this is such a long time ago, but they had like a business development section of the school where labels and people like that would go if they had opportunities. So sometimes they'd like some of the vocalists doing like top lines for, you know, dance tracks and stuff like that. And so obviously these people had approached through there, and then they'd been asked, oh, you know, who would you recommend to come for audition? I remember it was one of those really weird auditions where you're all sat in the room, which is really odd. You get up and the other bass players and the drummers and the other guitarists are all watching you do the audition, which is unbelievably the most horrible way to... That's the first one I'd ever done, and it was just like, you know, you just have to go for it, I guess. But yeah.
And you got the gig?
Yeah, that was super weird. There's some wicked bass players in there as well. Like some of the guys who are still playing now, I remember. ASM was really cool, I really enjoyed it. I mean, I sort of started the higher diploma course, but luckily it got really busy working, and I just sort of went into doing that, really. Things like playing the part, things that you kind of, I guess, you have to learn anyway, but just being on time and knowing when it's appropriate to play out. I think that's something that when you're young and you're into like Jacko and like Stanley Clarke and like Flea and Stuart Zender, obviously those guys are playing their own music, or they're in bands where they're kind of got their own license to do what they want. So you kind of pick up, not bad habits, but you just think, oh yeah, like playing like the Red Hot Chili Peppers is just how you should always play. And then you get to like a pop gig, and then someone's like, what are you doing? Why are you playing that? And you're like, oh, I don't really know. Do you know what I mean? So, oh, I don't know. That's the kind of question I hate. Only because I wouldn't want to blow my own trumpet too much, I don't think. I think what I think I've managed to do is find what I guess my thing, the way I play. I feel like my feel is quite good, if I had to say, and like that's what I try to. I remember like being at college and having lessons and stuff. People always say, "Oh, you need to develop your own style," and that always used to be so frustrating because it's just like, what does that really mean? You're listening to all these different players or bands that you're into, and you're learning all this different music. When you're at college, especially, you're looking at different styles of music and trying to learn those. But the idea that you need to amalgamate it and then just turn it into something you only do doesn't seem to make any sense when you're super young. But I think over time, I feel like I might have managed to do something along those lines, in that people call me and when I do gigs, I feel like I'm bringing my own thing to it, and I'm not trying to be anybody else or try and play like someone. I'm just play how I interpret the music and how my bass playing comes out. And that's through slowly over time learning how to take the things from different styles of music and take things from music I've played for other people and be like, well, that was really good, and those elements are things I think I should incorporate into my playing, and then those are things that weren't so good and I could be better at doing that. So yeah, hopefully I feel like I've cultivated something of a style of my own, or a vibe anyway, for want of a better word. These are all the things I remember being about 14, 15, and my dad being like, yeah, like, listen to this, have you heard this? So Louis Johnson's one of my favourite, he was one of my favourite bass players. Bernard Edwards, definitely. Jacko, I always loved. I thought just the feel and just the vibe is always wicked. I especially loved the really funky stuff he did. Come On, Come Over, and like the Kuru, Speak Like a Child riff is wicked. Just like, I loved Stuart Zender growing up. I just think his feel was wicked as well. And also just he was super young when he was doing loads of that stuff that was really cool. I always loved a bit of Flea as well. And then as I got a bit older, like Pino, people like that, just sort of, I guess the guys I knew when I was younger were like, they were kind of, I guess, more in bands. You know, like Bootsy Collins was in Funkadelic, and Bernard Edwards was in Chic, Louis Johnson was in the Brothers Johnson. And then obviously, as I got a bit older, I started to realise about session guys like Pino, and so my dad's like a massive Luther Vandross fan, so I'd heard loads of like Marcus Miller bass lines on that, and like Never Too Much, obviously, straight away my dad was like, oh, you got to hear the bass on this. Like the Don Blackman records and stuff that's a little bit more outside of like mainstream funk, do you know what I mean? A bit more jazz. But funk and like soul and jazz has always been my thing. Motown, you know, like James Jamerson was always one of my favourites. Like What's Going On was always like my favourite bass line for such a long time. I just thought it was like perfect. Do you know what I mean? The journey of it is just incredible. Stanley Clarke as well was like a big one. I love Stanley Clarke. I went to see him when I was about 16 at the Jazz Cafe, and I got there super early, and I was literally right at the front. That was so cool. All these gigs sort of, it's been like a pathway. So actually I ended up doing an audition for this guy called Cody Chestnut. So I did an audition for that, and I did that gig, and that gig was massive. Just confidence-wise, like some of the musicians on it were wicked. So it was really good to play with people who I've really felt were really good. And we did some really important gigs that were like very nerve-wracking at the time, but they went well, and that was a massive thing. And the tour manager through that recommended me for an artist called Kwabs. It was another one. It was another like step up, and there was a lot more synth bass on that gig, and the music was wicked, and all the players on it were wicked. So it was like, oh, okay, I really need to like bring my A game for this. And then the MD for Kwabs ended up MDing All Saints, and he got that gig. I was brought on board to do that. And that's so much fun. And those songs are like songs that you've grown up with, or I remember hearing when I was at school. So when you're playing like Never Ever and Pure Shores, it's wicked. The band's really good, and the girls are like absolutely like amazing to work with. The MD got the gig, and we had, I think, 4 days to learn like a 90-minute set for a festival. And that was intense. That was like learning everything, or not just that, but also the like live arrangements of it. It was that classic thing. You've got like 3 days on your own, and then like the girls are going to come in. You've never met them before. You can't be making any mistakes. Do you know what I mean? Otherwise, they're going to just be like, well, this is not going to work out. And it all moved very quickly. Yeah, that was hardcore. That was really. But then the gig went really well. It turns out they had the set time wrong, so we actually only needed 75 minutes, which is classic. So we're like going, and then this guy, you know, I can't remember, the stage manager's like, yeah, you've got 2 songs left, and we're all thinking we've got like 5 more tunes to do. So we had to quickly jump, cut out a load of stuff. That's been great, that gig. We've done did all the summer and did the tours with them. And one of my favourite gigs that I've ever done, we did Brixton Academy. That was the London headline show on the the first tour we did with them after their like sort of new album came out. And that was just amazing because you just got like a whole room full of people like singing Never Ever, and there's obviously like a slap bass, it's the slap bass breakdown bit, so you're playing the bass line and you're the only thing, you know, I mean, there's like Mo's giving it like 2 and 4 on the hi-hat, and then you're just like holding it down and like slapping the classic line, and all these people are singing the chorus. That was such a small gig when he started, so he'd been doing a lot of stuff on his own. He had like he had pads in his guitar, and an MD who I know called me for that. He just had a drummer who'd been doing a couple of things, I think, and he just said, "Oh, I just need someone who can just turn up and like sort of do it." So funnily enough, actually, I was expecting to audition, because often you have to audition these things, but he just needed someone, and that's been wicked because that gig was so small when we started, and it was just 3 of us for ages, and then I've just watched it grow organically. And at the beginning, I was sort of doing little gigs here and there when they were big enough. You know, it was so small. We did like a couple of showcase things, and then Tom would go off and do a load of gigs just on his own. And then as he's got bigger, then I became on it full time, and then now there's like another guitarist, and so that's been a wicked gig as well, because Tom's, again, such a lovely guy, and he's had us play on the record and play on the EPs when they were coming out. That's like, it's a session gig and it's a pop gig, but it's like being in a band with people as well, because you're just treated so well, and it's, you know, Tom trusts you. He wants your sort of creativity when it comes to like some of the bass lines. I hopefully bring sort of my own way of doing it, because the All Saints thing, some of it's quite regimented, but then some things, I think it's okay to bring your way of doing it. But yeah, that's obviously very pop. Like songs like Never Ever and Pure Shores, they all kind of open up eventually. Like I said, with Never Ever, you've got the whole little slap bass outro, middle section outro bit where everyone's singing along, and you've got a little bit of a moment to sort of add a little bit more than what's on the record. But obviously you're supporting like 4 vocalists, so it's just about like keeping it locked in with the drums, I think, and just supporting the music. And with Tom, that's changed a lot, because when it started, there was just drums and me. Tom playing guitar sometimes he had some pads. Sometimes just the pads would be going. So there was a lot of room to like sort of add stuff, because sometimes the bass lines were just like a 4-bar programmed loop. So Tom would sort of be like, yeah, make sure you do your thing. Do you know what I mean? Which is always a good way of like learning what your thing is, because then I guess you're just like, you just have to do it, you know. But I don't know, I don't think I ever personally like overthink what I'm gonna play, or like go, oh well, it's this, unless someone's like, there's an MD involved who's like, I want it to be like this. Otherwise it's, I don't know, I always feel like I'm kind of treading the line about where I think the bass should fit in this. Yeah, like I said with Tom, it started so organically that, you know, we've written some of the parts sort of on some of the songs. They were like quite simple, or Tom had sent us the demo, and then we actually went in the studio when he recorded them properly and did the parts on there. So that's kind of weird, because then so often you're playing parts that have been recorded by like a session guy or producer, but then when you're playing your own parts, you're like, oh well, how far can I push the envelope? Because technically I'm only doing myself a disservice if I do something wrong, or if I play something that's not like quite in the pocket or whatever. But they're both good gigs, and I definitely feel like there's enough of a headroom to have fun with it, and it's not too like, oh, you will just play this and just do nothing else. But every gig's different, I think. But so far, I've never found myself feeling sort of constricted on a gig, or feeling like, oh, you can't sort of, you just got to stick with this. And if you're on a gig and someone's like that, then that's totally fine as well, I guess. It's so important, I think, like really important, because pop music is just, so much of it's done in the box in the studio. A lot of it's done, especially nowadays with what you can do, obviously with Logic and Ableton and Pro Tools, whatever, what people can do on their own. It's a lot of big name producers just do it all on their own, all in the box, all on the keys. So recreating, first of all, a lot of bass lines are keyboard bass or synth bass. So just being able to like recreate the sounds and then play them on the keyboard bass, I think is really, especially if you want to do pop gigs, I think it's really important, because sometimes you just can't get the same sound or the same vibe on the electric. And again, that was like jumping in the deep end. I basically had hassled, I'd hassled this guy for gigs, and he was like an MD, another bass player at the time. And I remember he sent me to do a function, and he was like, oh, well, if you can do a function, then I might be able to trust you with something better. So I went and did this function for this guy in London, and that was like proper. I remember the guy sent me this massive list of tunes, didn't put any keys, so I had no idea what keys to learn them in. I assumed they were the original, but I didn't want to bother this other guy, so I was depping on this gig. So I learned them. I also just sort of like had a brief idea of like different other keys that I thought might be likely. Do you know what I mean? Let's sort of learn it like 2 tones away. So I thought, right, if I can play it 2 tones away, then I mean, I'm pretty much covered. So I did that gig and that went well. And then it's like, yeah, so I've got this gig and yeah, it's going to need quite a lot of keyboard bass. So yeah, you play that. And I was like, yeah, man, definitely. And I think I had Logic and a laptop at the time. I think I had played like, you know, a couple of MJ tunes on the, I mean, I had like one of those Yamaha keyboards with like DJ on it, but it had a MIDI out. So you could like, but I didn't, you know, it wasn't a synth bass by any means. So I had definitely played a couple, maybe 3 times, played a couple of Michael Jackson songs. But I was just like, yeah, I could totally do it. And he was like, wicked, yeah, well, I think he had this artist and he was MDing it and he was like a new guy. So yeah, and then I think literally the next day I went and bought like a little fatty synth. That's hilarious. Put it on this, I remember putting it on the table and I was just like, I have no idea how to use this. I was listening to, he'd sent me the tunes for this guy and I was listening to it thinking, how do I get this to sound like that? And I just sat there, I'm not joking, every day for hours just messing around with it till I started getting the sounds or close, do you know what I mean? And then, I mean, to be honest, at the time I was like, I felt, I got the sounds down, learned the parts, and it was like slowly getting more and more confident with it. When I think about it now, a bit like when you're younger and you're going out drinking when you're young and you get home and you think your parents haven't noticed, and then you think, as you get older, you think they must have noticed. I feel like maybe, who knows, maybe that MD must have been like, yeah, this guy's definitely never played a synth bass before. Maybe I did like manage it, but now I think back, I wonder if he was just like, I'm still going to give him a chance anyway. But yeah, so I did that gig and that was the start of it. So I love playing it. Wish I could be like incredible at it. I think I'm competent enough to do a lot of things. I'd love to be like some of the people like Daryl Freeman, like when you see him, I'd love to be able to do that because it's just unbelievable, some of the stuff he's playing on like the synth. And then it's always been in pretty much every gig I've ever done since. And it's always just a really nice option to have because even if you get people, some people do like things to be organic and don't like the whole synth bass thing. But so often when they've got a tune and it's been done on synth bass and you bring it in and you can play it properly, they see straight away the appeal of it and why it's better in the context of that tune or that style of music. So yeah, it's been good. And then playing with Kwabs was a real big one because that was like probably more synth than it was electric bass. And again, and it's funny because as the years go on, suddenly you're just developing this huge bank of synth sounds. And after a little while, I mean, now when gigs come in, so often I've got sounds that are almost close enough that I can tweak to get right. So it's like, it started off being like a huge daunting task, but then the more you do it, the more you build up, obviously your confidence playing, and then the more you build up your bank of sounds, which means that it's all there. I mean, and I think for me, my thing's always been the hard synths. So I've always had like a little Moog, little fatty, and now I've got the subsequent one, the new one. But there's a whole other world of like, you know, doing it through Mainstage or Ableton and having soft synths with a laptop and an interface, and that's a whole other world that's worth getting into as well, I think, because a lot of some synth bass sounds are done, you know, in the box on Logic, and sometimes you can hear it's literally like a Logic synth preset patch, and if you don't, sometimes you can't get that from a hardware synth. Sometimes you need to be doing it through a laptop. Stevie Wonder tunes, you know what I mean? Like all the stuff that Stevie Wonder's playing when he's playing the Moog on his own with his left hand. I mean, all that stuff's just like a treasure trove of how to play synth bass, basically. He's like doing another album at the moment, but we started doing it in 2015, I think. About 2 years it was, the whole campaign. They had another bass player who, another really talented guy, and he went into songwriting and production and left to go pursue other things. And then it was through the tour manager for this guy Cody, that he recommended me to the MD for Kwabs. And yeah, that was a great gig. That was like 2 years. And I did a bit of playing on the album, actually. Played one song on the record, which was really cool. It was just great. That's a lot of synth bass, and the electric bass lines were wicked, and the arrangements were really cool. That was like busiest gig I'd done at that point. And we were doing like television shows and going to Europe and doing like summer festivals abroad and stuff. Done a bit of that with Cody, but that one was, yeah, like a real eye-opener. It's definitely, yeah, program pop, but then it's got like a lot of neo-soul and kind of jazz vibes in it, and the influence there. Kwabs went to the Royal Academy, and so did his guitarist. They went together, so they know each other a long time. And so I think that's a lot of his influences were jazz and music and stuff like that. So the chord progression was just really nice stuff to play. The arrangements were really cool. There was this one song that was like, just had such a wicked 90s R&B vibe. It was called My Own, and the synth, that was all synth bass. Again, just like really nice lines to play, and the MD on that like always gave a little bit of, you know, there was always enough leeway to sort of play out a little bit, which was really cool. Never Ever, definitely. That's obviously a classic. I mean, you can't go wrong, because it's got the whole like slappy pop bit, but then I kind of play it so like I play the low notes with my fingers and then just pop. That's kind of how it sounds like it's been done on the record. It's probably just a program bass, I've no idea. But there's a nice little discipline of actually mixing. That's actually quite complicated if you don't practice it, to sort of like play. When you're in slap bass mode for whatever, and you've got your thumb and your fingers, obviously you're all committed to that one style. But when you've got to like switch between the two, it starts off being a bit tricky. That's a wicked one to play. Pure Shores is really cool, because that bass line's like, it's like tense. So it starts off with like these like tense, and then the last chord is like you're playing like an F sharp. I play an F sharp with my thumb, and then play a fifth on the G string, so that the F sharp's on the B string and the G string the fifth. I guess what would it be? The C sharp is like with my little finger. Just like little weird things like that, and I'm like, that bass line's so cool, and just I don't know how they came up with that. But that last one, you're playing a fifth over all the strings, which is just mental. You know, the second you start playing it, the second note that the piano chord comes in for Never Ever, and they've got the whole little like talky bit at the beginning, and everyone just goes mental. There's nothing like getting to play songs like that. It's just those are the moments when you're like, oh, that makes the job, makes doing music so worth it. And with Tom, he's got loads of loads of that is like playing the bass and then jumping on the synth for like the choruses, and I love that whole thing as well. I love when you rock out on the bass a bit, then you play a bit of synth bass, and then you come back on. Those are really cool. So he's got quite a lot of tunes like that. His first tune with this one tune we opened with called Angels, that's got a great bass line on it. Again, the synth bass, that's got synth bass on the record, I think, and it's super simple, but we've kind of rocked it up because Tom's like a guitarist, and he's like a really competent guitarist. So a lot of the stuff we've kind of made him a bit more rocky and a bit more bandy, almost like playing a bit more. He's got a tune called Karma, and that's like the verses are on the bass, the chords are really nice, and then the choruses are on the synth bass. So it's all that jumping around. I love doing all of that. I mean, some of it's unnecessary, but I'll be like playing right up to the bar, and then I'll still be playing this note, then I'll do a slide, then I'm like, you know, I'm on the synth bass trying to turn the bass down so it doesn't. I love all that kind of the drama of trying to like not fuck that up. It's always really fun. He's had a really big tune, Leave a Light On, and obviously that's like a big crowd pleaser, and that's like the song we've been ending with for the last sort of year and a half. And just having all those people just like screaming his tune while you're playing it, it's wicked. With Tom, it's been pretty relentless. We've kind of, like I said, I've done it for such a long time, and it's really seen it grow. So now we've just finished like a festival run throughout the summer, and then in October and November he's going back out on tour in the UK and Europe. We've been to America with Tom, done a load of stuff over there, so next year they want to go back to America and do more out there. They repack the album, you know, and they do like deluxe versions, so I think he's going to have like another version of the album come out at the end of the year. The best thing about that gig, one of the nicest things about it, is it's been so busy that it's kept me constantly in work. And it's just nice because then it means that when you've got downtime, you can decide how to use it. Whereas sometimes when you're transitioning between gigs, or, you know, an artist's campaign's coming to the end, you need to be hustling for other things. And it's been nice to just, when I've had downtime, to go and try and do some writing, or try and look at other ways of, I don't know, being creative as opposed to just always relying on playing other people's songs or doing functions and stuff. It's given me opportunities to pursue other things in music, which has been really good. It kind of rolls back around into summer again because his album only got released in March. So I guess the album campaign will keep going, and then I guess hopefully other things hopefully it'll keep going, and then when it tails off and he goes to write another record, I have to get back out there and start hustling again, basically.
All right, Jack. So we're doing a corporate gig today for Tom Walker in Ali Pali. We've just finished the sound check, and we're on this lovely green carpet on stage, which is absolutely beautiful. I have to get some of that from my own flat. First off, the Aguilar cabs, so the 212 and the little TH500, just a small one for the day. I just love this stuff because it sounds really clean, and I think it just gives a really true representation of whatever bass you put through it. So that's always the go-to amp. And then the pedal board, there's this Noble DI, which is like an SVT kind of simulator thing that's got 2 valves in it down on the side here, and this sounds really great, really warm, really fat tone. And then everything else is pretty standard, like there's an AB pedal, tuner, octave and distortion, little compressor, and then I've got an actual separate DI for the Moog I just keep on the board. And then that just runs the 2 lines, and then the Moog is up here. So yeah, all the presets on the bottom. This is the sub 37, and it's just a really good synth. Loads of different options, loads of different sounds. And then the bass, Fender Jazz, 5-string, just because so often you need the low B, just because it covers you for everything. So yeah, that's everything. Speak to you soon. Oh yeah, and obviously the essential in-ears with the Arsenal Canon on, because that actually makes them sound way better. Just putting that on there, as we discussed about football before. So anyway, take care, mate. Bye.
Oh God, I don't know. I'm actually not sure what I'm trying to say here. What do I mean? I might have to start again on this question.